Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomena, and again, welcome back to Ask UFO Twitter. And this Ask UFO Twitter is going to be on the two new New York Times UFO articles where the headline, most definitely of the first one, was the UAP task force. But a big story down towards the bottom of the article was crash retrievals, or we can say off-world vehicles, and a briefing that was done to a Defense Department agency by Dr. Eric Davis, which we now know also Christopher Mellon of To the Stars Academy had also said that he was present for that briefing.
I was quoting Eric Davis. I know you're familiar with his work when I read that New York Times paragraph a moment ago. Do you believe that there are objects in our possession, broadly defined our possession, that are from something other than this Earth?
What I will say about that is that I think that assertion should be taken seriously. I'm aware of, I know Eric very well. I understand his arguments. I was present at his briefings on the Hill, and he tried to provide some leads for them to follow to enable them potentially to confirm this. It is an issue that should be taken seriously. In fact,
when it took place. Now these are pretty big revelations, and I think mostly an impact for the general public, because just a few years ago we were asking questions, not we as people in the UFO community, but the general public were asking if UFOs were real and if the US government had any involvement with UFOs. That was not even actually thought about much by the general public, or something that was just denied basically. And then come 2017, we have the New York Times break the article on ATIP, and now everybody's asking, they know that there is a US government UFO program, so now they're asking, are UFOs real? Now, 2020, we have these articles drop by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal discussing a UAP task force and the possibility of the government being in possession of off-world vehicles in 3 years. Those are tremendous strides in the general public and the public perception of UFOs. And I think that you'll, again, 3 years time, those are tremendous strides. What are some follow-up questions that may come? Now we're asking, is the U.S. government or possibly other governments in possession of off-world vehicles? A follow-up question might be, are there any bodies, right? Or were there any pilots to those crafts? Where's the conversation going to go from here? That's another important point. I do think that this is something that's going to be continuing for a while with this crash retrieval thing. It doesn't seem like it's just going to be skipped over. I do think there will be an emphasis on materials, materials analysis, metamaterials. Tom DeLonge had mentioned that TTSA is going to do their first anti-gravitic experiment / study, so that kind of correlates with this a little bit. And it's a lot has happened in the last few years, so I think that there will also be some follow-up on this, considering Ralph Blumenthal's pretty tremendous comments that he left in the comments section of the New York Times articles on the New York Times website. He was basically saying that this is only part of the story, and that not everything can be reported at once, which is insinuating that there will be follow-up articles, that there will be more information coming out. You know, if they're going to have articles, likely there'll be some substance to it. So this is something that's going to be continued to be hammered on. And again, it's such a crucial issue, going from are there UFOs to do we have UFOs in our possession? Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Hi. I want to do this shout out for James and his really excellent channel, Engaging the Phenomenon. He asked me to give some reactions on the recent information coming out from the New York Times, which has really rocked, once again, the UFO community. More journalism over the last 3 years coming out of that publication. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that after 70 years of total denial and debunking, that the New York Times has now allowed several well-researched articles on UFOs to appear over the last 3 years. Kind of amazing. Now, we can and should be asking why. Why is this obvious establishment mouthpiece permitting this? And we do need to ask that. But we also need to be asking something which, in my view, is actually even more important, which is the information contained in all of these articles true? Can we prove any of it to be false? And so far, I don't see any examples of outright lies in the various pieces that they publish over the last few years. Definitely a case of getting a sliver of the truth rather than the whole truth. But with UFOs, you got to say, like, even a tiny bit of truth coming out of the New York Times is strong medicine for most of the general public. And you can see this by the reaction, much of the media, much of the various pundits that are non-UFO people, how they're reacting. A lot of these people are actually kind of shocked by all that has been coming out. Now, the last two pieces released in July of this year, a couple of new, really interesting pieces of information come out. Really one bomb, you could say, that was dropped. And that's the big one that Dr. Eric Davis had given briefings at the Pentagon and on Capitol Hill about, quote, retrievals from off-world vehicles not made on this earth. And by the way, for anyone who's been paying attention to the whole saga of the Thomas Wilson document written by Dr. Eric Davis, you can see that the language from that document is still working its way into the public domain through this New York Times piece. They're clearly using the phrase not made on this earth. Obviously, it harkens back to the Wilson document. Now, other than that one statement by Eric Davis, there wasn't really a whole lot of real bombshells to be dropped there, at least in my opinion. Kind of a disappointment for a lot of folks in the UFO community who were expecting something much bigger. I will say the follow-up piece that Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal wrote was a bit interesting, kind of this op-ed to tell the public that we're past the time of whether to believe or disbelieve in UFOs. That story is over. Basically, they're saying it's now a reality. It's proven. I mean, that's really what they're saying in that piece. And the only question that they're indicating there is we need to find out what these UFOs are. And I thought the article was a bit coy, to be honest. So on the one hand, they're saying, well, UFOs are definitely, they don't equal aliens. And they were quite emphatic about that. But in the very next breath, they're saying they also don't appear to be Russian or Chinese. So where does that leave you? And particularly, I mean, you could say, well, U.S. black budget. But the problem with that whole argument, as I have been saying for years, is that if you want to say the Tic Tac UFO is U.S. black budget, fine. But then you've got to go through the entire history of the UFO phenomenon where these exact same types of things have been encountered and recorded with instrumentation, by the way, by the Air Force, by the Navy, by the Army, back into the 1940s. And in fact, there are cases even going back before that of Tic Tac type UFOs. So black budget seems to be a bit of a stretch. And the fact is, you get that sense with the New York Times coverage. I think Leslie and Ralph are essentially saying the same thing here. They're being very, very careful, very, very coy. Very carefully done, very diplomatic. And I know it seems incredibly weak to many people in the UFO community who we know that there's so much more to all of this. It is true. There's a massive reality that still hasn't been touched. So I look at it in two ways. On the one hand, right now, in about 3 years' time, we as a public have moved a long way on the UFO subject, from essentially nothing 3 years ago to a point where now I think we can say that UFOs are just about becoming part of our accepted, officially sanctioned reality. We are this close to it, it seems to me, and it's really quite astonishing. And moreover, we're possibly moving toward an acceptance of some form of UFO crash retrieval. It's not as clear, but we're definitely moving in that direction too. But so much is missing. And not only is it missing, it may never come to the surface, at least to the public for a long time. None of the history, as I've said, is being discussed. All the old encounters for years and years, like that's really not coming up at all. This massive history of military encounters with these things is also being completely siphoned out of the telling of the last 3 years of how the mainstream media is covering it. And crash retrievals, we are at the tip of the iceberg. Whether we will ever explore that full iceberg is really quite unknown. And officially, the whole movement on UFOs might just stop where it is. I say officially. In other words, in the public mind. In other words, it's entirely possible that what we call the cover-up, what I call a cover-up, simply moves to a new normal. The new normal could be something like, yeah, these things are real, these UFOs. Yes, we've acquired a couple of artifacts, but we haven't figured anything out. Not really. And no alien bodies or anything else to speak of. Like that, in other words, that could very well be a big red stop sign appearing in the near future. Or we can ask, well, will there be more revelations and a genuine avalanche? And that's going to depend on a few things. That'll depend on how much do groups like TTSA really have on this. Info that they have that they can prove to the world. I'm guessing that they have some information, although you have to really wonder how much of it they can share. Information they've gained, some of these members through official clearances and through maybe what they've learned informally through the grapevine with other high-level people. There's no doubt that they know a few things that they're confident about, but not necessarily anything they can share confidently without getting attacked. And I feel that I know this because I've spoken with a few of the people in that organization, and that is absolutely the impression that they've given me. So how strong they feel in being able to share information, say if there's anything they have on abductions or anything on alien bodies or anything on the status of reverse engineered ET tech. It's not clear to me that they're going to have the goods to deliver in a way that they're confident about or in a way that doesn't get them in trouble. I am hoping that they have a few cards left to play, but they may be hitting a dead end. Totally possible. So the thing is, like, will any of these current UFO revelations lead to anything tangible? As incredible as it may seem, I think it's entirely possible that nothing happens, at least if things stay just at the level that they currently are. And it's worth asking, what would be necessary to actually break this game open? Well, I co-wrote a book on that about 10 years ago. It's called AD After Disclosure. And one thing I feel that is necessary, one thing of many, is that people have to be able to research and speak and demand things of their government. You know, even in 2010, when we wrote that book, you could really see the writing on the wall. That is the future of the closing off of things like free speech, the kind of consolidation of a global system. You could see it in 2010, but I have to say this whole phenomenon has happened much, much faster, much more rapidly than I anticipated. In the last 5 years, we've just seen a very substantial shutting down of free avenues of discourse. It's not totally shut down, obviously, but it's much more restricted. And what I think that means is we're looking at a situation where, well, it could very well be possible for a disclosure narrative to come out that is completely controlled by the establishment in ways that they like, that allows them to give up the information they want to give up and not more than that. So we will have to see. I believe it's more important now than ever for there to be smart, engaged, independent, and brave voices out there. That's why I'm glad I'm doing this clip for James's channel. And James, Keep going. You're doing a great job.
So with the New York Times articles that have come out recently, they represent, to a lot of us, step 80, step 100, or step 3000 along our many years journey of being in this field of ufology, of looking at dates and times and photos and documents and digging through the weeds, because our heads are so into it that, you know, it's just another step. It's just another nugget. It's just another thing to fall in our lap that we have to go, okay, and pick through and look at. And sure, some of us are going to say, but this date here doesn't match this time, and this person here said this, but this doesn't. That's totally awesome and needs to happen, of course. But at the same time, I think we have to realize that for most people, and when I say most people, I mean the general public, something like the New York Times articles represent step 1 to them. This is the first time they've gone, wait, what? Or this is real? And I think a lot of us can remember the first time we felt that and we thought that. And so I think what that does is it brings more people into the conversation. It brings people who wouldn't normally give a damn about this or thought it was a conspiracy theory or crazy or sci-fi. It brings those people into the conversation. And I see that as a very positive thing, a very welcoming thing. And I think that if we could, you know, gear part of our energy towards those newcomers and introduce them to, you know, step 1 and 2 and 3 of ufology, then that's a thumbs up from me. I think that's a very good thing. That's what I'm most excited about, is not necessarily me, but seeing the people around me come up to me and say, okay, so you're a guy that knows something about this. Tell me more. That's awesome. The whole tell me more thing is such a positive outcome, I think. Out of everything, I think that's the most important is that. So again, thumbs up from me.
Okay, so yeah, when it comes to my involvement regarding the New York Times, because obviously to some extent I was involved, which allowed me to get the interview out. I became aware of Leslie and Ralph's interest in this story when Ralph first reached out to Michael Hall, a friend and a colleague of mine who, you know, I was actually lucky enough to jump into the live stream when he was talking to Ralph Blumenthal on the phone and basically speaking about their interest in pursuing, at that point, the Admiral Wilson leaks and information around the Admiral Wilson leaks. I don't think there was mention of crash retrievals specifically outside of the realm of the Admiral Wilson leaks at that point, but I'm not 100% sure. So I became aware that they were making a story at this point. I didn't become directly involved with Ralph or Leslie until I made the breakdown video with Mr. X. So the ultimate breakdown of the Admiral Wilson documents, which is a 3-hour and 17-minute analysis going word for word through the documents, where Mr. X brings a profound level of research knowledge to the table, dropping all sorts of names of people that weren't previously connected to the documents but have, you know, subsequently been connected via his research. And it was at this point when I made this breakdown, which, just to, you know, clarify, is available now and has been available for quite some time. When we made this breakdown, within 24 hours, me and Mr. X were contacted by Ralph and Leslie. So basically, they wanted us to consider taking down the video just for a small level of time, 30 days to be exact. And that would give them enough time to essentially secure leads in investigating this story. And there were subsequent discussions between Mr. X and Ralph and Leslie, because we did agree to take down the video. Now, the reason we took down the video, or I took down the video, was because I realized that the New York Times has a lot more influence, a lot more clout, can, you know, basically push a lot more further than Project Unity. And so it seemed like a logical step to make for them, you know, to essentially just back off a little bit and let the New York Times do their thing, let these journalists bring out a story, because there's no way that I'd be able to reach the same level of people as the NYT. So it made sense to me. But the one condition that I put into it, you know, I didn't want money or anything. I just wanted to secure the first interview, because at the end of the day, I'm still operating a platform and I want to try and further my platform. I don't want to hold things back, or I don't want to demand money for these types of things. I just want to try and get my voice out there a little bit further. And so basically I said to them, I'll take it down for 30 days as you've requested, but I would like to have the initial interviews with yourselves when you drop these articles, because I really, this would be a great opportunity for me to be able to get questions in from the community. And I'd just really appreciate if you'd consider that being part of the agreement. And straight away, they agreed to that, and they completely respected that agreement and gave me the first interviews, which I'm extremely grateful for. So that's my involvement in the story. And then my opinion on the stories. Obviously, from a perspective within the UFO community, we know that there could have been more. And I know there could have been more in regards to the Admiral Wilson leaks and things like that. And it is my opinion that they are still definitely looking into those areas of research, because they had a profound interest in it, to the level of which they actually asked me to take down a video, which was 3 hours of nothing but Admiral Wilson. So, that's quite a good signature to you that they are still interested, I would imagine, in pursuing a story related to these documents. I'm not speaking for Ralph or Leslie when I say that. That's just my opinion, but it would seem that way based on the interactions we've had, them asking me to take down this video. So in regards to the actual content of the articles, I think that they were strong enough for the mainstream. I think they pushed forward a completely different discussion point that hasn't been talked about before: crash retrieval programs. You've got to remember that even though in the UFO community we genuinely are overly saturated with so much information, that so many of us have knowledge, or well, maybe not direct knowledge, but informed speculation, or have a pretty good hunch that crash retrieval programs have been operating, and we've probably known that for a long time. Some people have known that for decades, or at least speculated on that for decades. And so it can be frustrating when you're in the UFO community and you see these things coming out into the mainstream, and they're just kind of touching what we would consider to be the bare bones of the discussion. But you've got to remember that these bare bones for us are huge, huge pieces of information for the public. And crash retrievals have never been mentioned before. This is the first time. This is absolutely a checkpoint, a flag in the ground. This is a marked point now, where the discussion will go on from crash retrievals. And I do not believe for a moment that this is the summation of this material. It is going to continue, it's going to progress, unravel, get more detailed. And for some people, it will be a frustrating progress in regards to the pace, but we do have to remember that the community in regards to UFO community is a niche. And we do have to remember that the public does need to catch up to a lot of things that we already know. And then we want to catch up to things that the government supposedly knows, or contractors supposedly know. But the public has to catch up to some of the knowledge that we're already aware of first, and it is a gradual progress. So, you're seeing a lot of 101 lessons coming out in the public, which we've already taken in and digested and done further research upon. But I would urge you to see this as a marked change, a real turning point in the discussion on a public level. And I think that I think we can expect to see a lot of political interest coming from this, as we've already started to see. And then obviously the second article that came out recently, I see the latest article as it's more directed to the UFO community, in my opinion. It's more directed to the UFO community. It seems like it's trying to tell people who already know a bit more that there is more coming. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like they're trying to just give us a little bit of a hint that, yes, we know that, certain things have been held back, or we've got more information to go, but, we're trying our best to get this out. And I do believe they are. I don't think that, I've got a lot of respect for Ralph and Leslie, not just because they gave me this interview, but because, how we've been interfacing. I very much respect the way they do things, and I respect the way that they try and bring a story out. And so I have no personal issues with them. I do sometimes worry about the overarching structure that they, that they interact with, that being the giant media platforms that they have to try and go to, essentially sometimes cap in hand, saying this is a really important story, please pay attention to it. So, they have their own unique stresses, like we have our own unique stresses. Although I would say that there is some degree of truth to, you've got to be careful when a big story is coming out. at the same time, I feel like we're all on the same team here. Some people are just operating on a larger level of media distribution, and that happens to be Leslie and Ralph. But we are extremely important. The people on the ground in the trenches doing the bare bones research and really trying to push it forward, and have been trying to push it forward for decades, and way before I was born. We all matter, we all have something to bring to this. And so I would say that these articles are a fantastic step in the right direction. And although I would love to see way more information in them, I am confident that information is going to start coming out at a far more exponential rate, in my opinion. I think momentum is starting to gather and gain and pick up pace. And with the recent introduction of crash retrievals into the discussion publicly, I think we can start to see a marked increase in interest in both the political sphere and the public sphere and the mainstream media sphere. So yeah, I think it's really good things on the horizon, guys. I really think that we're in a unique time period for this subject now. Obviously, people have been trying to tackle this for a long time. Right now, though, I think we're in a very unique time period, and I just feel honored to be a part of it with all of you. So thank you very much, and take care.
Hello, UFO Twitter. It was awesome to see the article by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal published in the New York Times on July 23rd. And it was also very cool of the authors to take the time to provide a little insight and a kind of behind-the-scenes look at the creation of the story in their July 28th follow-up article in the Times Insider. I have tremendous respect for Leslie. She's a friend and I've known her for almost 10 years now. Her book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record, is still probably my favorite book on the subject. I remember back in 2011 when we were getting ready to give her the Researcher of the Year award at the International UFO Congress. Back then, I think we'd originally called it the Ufologist of the Year award, and Leslie made it clear that she wasn't a ufologist, she was a journalist. So we changed the name of the award.
Through her tireless efforts and relentless persistence, Leslie Kean has helped relieve the stigma around UFOs, raising the credibility of all our efforts and giving mainstream audiences a better understanding of the need for official recognition of this topic. This is why Leslie Kean receives our Researcher of the Year award.
For many people who follow the UFO topic every day, the Times article essentially served as a great recap of recent UFO stories that had been buzzing for a while. But of course, for the general public, the article provided what we're getting accustomed to seeing every couple of months, and that's the dropping of pretty incredible information confirming the government's ongoing interest in the topic of UFOs. It's awesome when major media outlets like the Times cover UFO-related stories, and as anybody who follows the topic knows, that's something that happens pretty regularly because of the tremendous and widespread interest in UFOs. These are great for generating discussions and helping the public realize that UFOs are legitimately a real thing. I love how Leslie and Ralph pointed out that in their follow-up article that despite this continuing pervasiveness of this question, we should be past the question, are UFOs real? It's been demonstrated ad nauseum. But this question isn't going away anytime soon. The general public is still stuck at that basic question. Unfortunately, an unavoidable negative element typically follows articles like this, and that's when other media outlets write their own stories about the original article, but incorrectly state information. We definitely saw that with the Times article. Media outlets around the world were reporting about how the Times said the Pentagon had off-world material and how the Pentagon was going to reveal off-world material to the public. Of course, this isn't true. The Times article included quotes from Eric Davis, a Pentagon subcontractor, who said he briefed the Pentagon and members of Congress about others who he believes have recovered off-world materials. So it's not the Pentagon that supposedly has these materials. Also, as of right now, the Pentagon isn't going to reveal anything to the public. The Times article highlighted the recently revealed Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force and a request by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence for a report to be created by the Director of National Intelligence about UFOs. This request was added to the committee notes associated with the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, which started out as a Senate bill and then was attached as an amendment to another bill. Although it's passed the Senate, this bill still has a long road ahead of it. And even if it passes, there's no guarantee a report will even be created because this request won't be mandated, at least not legally mandated. I hope that the report gets created, and I hope the public gets to see the unclassified version, but it's still a long way off. But bottom line, it was great to see the stories in the Times, great to see the buzz they created, and great to see Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal continuing with their series of reports on this awesome and mysterious topic.
Do the two New York Times articles that published on July 23rd and July 28th by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal prove that UFO crash retrievals have taken place? And the answer is emphatically no. However, I will echo something that Leslie Kean stated to Project Unity when they were interviewed. And that is that numerous associates from the Pentagon program that have been involved in UFO investigations for decades with high security clearances have stated they are convinced that UFO crashes and retrievals have occurred based upon their access to classified information. Leslie Kean stated in the interview that if anyone were to know if such activities were occurring, it would be precisely the people with the high security clearances and the people with the high security clearances involved in this arena. So this may not prove crash retrievals have occurred, but it certainly points strongly in that direction, unless you just think they're making it up.
Hey, first of all, thanks for inviting me to take part in Ask UFO Twitter. And the subject is the recent New York Times articles, the pair of them that came out. My thoughts on those? Sure, I'll share them. The first article that came out on a Friday, I thought it was nice to see it in the New York Times, to see the topic being discussed in that fashion. As I wrote at the time, was there really anything new there? Not really. If you are someone who follows UFO Twitter, who follows all the great reporters that we have, doing that sort of stuff, you already knew most of what was in there. There were a couple of fresh-looking quotes, one of which had to be retracted later. I'm not even going to dig into that part of it. But does that mean that it was not worth publishing? No, I thought it was great that it was, because there are so many people who don't follow this type of news, but when it shows up in the New York Times, suddenly they pay attention. So it gets it out to a much wider audience. Personally, I thought the follow-up article that came out on Monday was a lot more intriguing. That was the one where Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal addressed the question, do we believe in UFOs? Which seemed like just sort of a philosophical discussion to start with. But when you got down to the bottom of it, that's when things really got interesting, because they started citing some other sources, and they talked about briefings that had been held for Congress, for various committees, for different groups. And they even included one slide they had obtained, which came from, I believe, one of Chris Mellon's presentations, or might have been Greer, I forget off the top of my head. But it was also apparently used in at least one, or possibly more than one, briefings to elected officials, which really was strange, because some of the wording they used, it actually came out and said things like, off-world materials. And also, one that didn't get as much attention, but that briefing apparently discussed Russia and China as terrestrial adversaries. I found that really strange, because why would you feel compelled to refer to other countries on this planet as terrestrial? Well, the only reason in my mind that you would say terrestrial adversaries is if you're offering an alternative option. And what is there left that's not terrestrial? Dare we say the word? Extraterrestrial. That's the only other option. And it's starting to sound more and more like these classified briefings have had people in government getting read in to discussions that involve the possibility that we could be looking at something non-terrestrial, that these things showing up in the sky, might not be of human origin whatsoever. And if that is being taken seriously, then I think that's a sea change. That's a big shift. And we know it's being taken seriously because I think by now everybody saw Marco Rubio included, a provision in a bill that's currently being considered, calling on the Pentagon to get their act together and release a report about what we know about UAPs, and to make any portions that are not necessarily, don't have to be classified, available to the public. How big would that be? So, yeah, that's why I thought the second article was more interesting to me. I know a lot of people are disappointed because the first article, there was so much buzz everywhere on Twitter, everywhere on social media, that it was going to cover a crash retrieval program. I've gone through it all. I've listened to a lot of other people's analysis of it, and that subject was only touched on in passing and only in third person. Are we any closer to confirming that such a, deep black budget SAP for crash retrieval of UFOs exists? No. No, we're not. The Times did not come up with anything that they felt good enough to print, apparently, that even suggested that anyone had confirmed such a thing. The closest they got was talking to a couple people who were willing to say they thought it was possible that material from some crashes had been retrieved, and if so, that they should be studied. Fair enough. But that doesn't get us any closer to what I think some people were hoping for, which was some sort of validation of the Wilson Davis documents, and everything that goes in with that whole sort of controversial mess. So, no, I don't think we got any closer to that, but we didn't need to. As I already said, I think the best thing that happened was this brought a lot more attention to the subject to a wider audience. And just as I'm recording this, yesterday, Jake Tapper on CNN did a segment on UAPs. And this morning, because I'm recording this on Saturday, Michael Smerconish did an interview with Chris Mellon talking about the same thing. So it seems to be spreading. And the mainstream media, I believe, is waking up. And all in all, it's a good thing. So thanks for having me.
Thanks again, guys, for tuning in to Ask UFO Twitter. Thank you guys for participating in UFO Twitter in general, keeping the conversation moving, the questions going, the information being shared, a lot of great dialogue going on for, things for people to contemplate, really, and ways to get information out to other people. And, super big thanks to everybody who participated in this Ask UFO Twitter. Big shout out and thanks to Richard Dolan, who's done a lot of excellent work in the field over the years. Stephen Greenstreet, who has the basement office, he's doing tremendous work there, reaching a lot of people regarding the UFO question and the UFO reality. We got Jay from Project Unity, who's done a lot of great work, and he's coming up in the field and he's participating in these Ask UFO Twitters. Most certainly UFO Jesus, for always sharing the good word with us. Jason McClellan, who also does a lot of excellent work and reporting on this stuff. And Jazz Shaw, who's been participating in UFO Twitter as well. So thank you again so much, guys, and I highly suggest that you follow and research and look into all the people in these Ask UFO Twitter videos. Look up their Twitter accounts. Look if they have YouTubes. Check out their YouTubes and their websites, which I will link some of them in the description below. So thanks again for tuning in, guys. Participate in UFO Twitter and be part of the conversation. Take care.